Hard magic versus soft magic is the ever-present debate among modern fantasy fans. The debate stems from Brandon Sanderson's first law of magics, which states, an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. In this video, I will put the debate to rest and show you how to use this law effectively in your writing, no matter which type of magic you choose to use. Not stated outright in the law, but described in Sanderson's essay, which I've linked in the description, is the concept of hard versus soft magic. Hard magic is well defined and follows specific rules or laws, similar to math or science. Some examples are allomancy in Sanderson's Mistborn, chromaturgy in Brent Week's Lightbringer series, or equivalent exchange from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Soft magic is more mystical, and its inner workings are largely unexplained or unknown. Some examples include the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, or the Force in Star Wars. This law and Sanderson's personal approach to magic has come to define how the modern fantasy views magic. It sparked an ongoing and never-ending debate on which is better, hard versus soft. However, there is a huge misconception that somehow this law states that hard magic is better. People will cite this law to explain how hard magic systems are a way to improve your writing or improve your fantasy novel. Personally, I see this conversation and its conclusions as a misunderstanding of the fundamental concept behind Sanderson's first law of magic. The law itself leaves ample space for both types of magic. Listen again. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. This law isn't even about magic at all, but rather about an author's ability to solve conflict with magic. A different way to say this would be, don't use magic to solve conflict if your reader doesn't understand the magic. Reframed like this, it becomes writing advice on how to solve conflict, and both hard magic and soft magic can be used effectively and ineffectively. Let's talk about how, starting with hard magic. A hard magic system is essentially the act of giving your reader the inner workings of your magic. There are many ways to do this in interesting ways, but the best way is to use it to give the characters tools to solve their problems. A perfect example is equivalent exchange in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. The law of equivalent exchange is that something cannot be created from nothing, and that in order to create something of equal value must be exchanged and lost. In the opening of the story, two young brothers, Alphonse and Edward, attempt to bring their mother back to life through alchemy. But because of this law, they must give something of equal value, and Alphonse becomes the sacrifice in a horrible twist of events. This law now defines the brothers, and by extension, the series. And the reader's understanding of the magic, both in concept and the stakes it poses for the brothers, makes magic an amazingly satisfying way to solve conflict. While hard magic systems can serve as beautiful character growth and clutch plot resolutions, they have their drawbacks. They can be boring if not rooted in the characters. And even when rooted in the characters, they can turn into info dumps and tedious exposition. They can also get complicated and difficult to understand and follow, and confusing readers won't leave them satisfied. I promise. There are many ways to handle the complexities in hard magic systems. 1. Only give the reader the information they need to know. The original Mistborn series sticks to a few basic ideas in the first novel and then dives deeper in later books. Speaking of, 2. Go deeper, not wider. The deeper you take the reader into a concept, the better the reader will understand it. In contrast, introducing too many concepts will spread the reader thin. 3. Repetition. The more you explain, the better we'll understand. Mistborn again is a great example. That book repeats over and over what different metals do, and I really appreciate it. 4. Root your magic in character. Readers invest in character. and will work to understand things that matter to your characters. Fullmetal Alchemist, again, is an amazing example. The main characters are practically synonymous with equivalent exchange for how much it's affected their lives. We care so much more about the magic because of how connected we are with the characters. Soft magic is loosely defined and typically vague. The Chronicles of Narnia is perhaps notorious for this type of magic. The reader doesn't know why the painting in Eustace's room suddenly comes to life and takes the kids to Narnia, but it does. Soft magic is great to give the world wonder or to cause conflict and problems for characters, but without solid explanations of the parameters of the magic, it doesn't work to solve conflict in a way that will satisfy readers. But that doesn't mean that soft magic can't solve conflict satisfyingly. It just means the reader needs some parameters if you want to use magic to solve conflict. The Chronicles of Narnia is a perfect example of this. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Father Christmas visits the children and gives them each a gift. Lucy is given a cordial that will cure almost any ailment. While we may not know how this item works, we know what result it will achieve when used. So when Lucy uses it to heal those wounded and those frozen in the battle against the White Witch, not only do we, the reader, understand what's happening, it's a very satisfying way to resolve a conflict. I highly doubt that we would feel any different if we understood the inner workings of the medicine or how to harvest or synthesize it or whatever. However, if Father Christmas had given Lucy a mystery liquid and winked and said, "You'll know when to use it," it wouldn't work as satisfying conflict resolution at all. Some tips on how to use soft magic. 1. Just don't use it to solve conflict. Let it cause all kinds of problems or be a source of wonder or whatever you want to do. But when it comes to solving conflict, stay away. But if you don't want to stay away, 2. Give the reader the information they need to know. The example I gave in the Chronicles of Narnia is a great example of this. 3. Use magic to open more questions. In the first Harry Potter novel, Quirrell, with Voldemort in the back of his head, touches Harry. Quirrell disintegrates, and Voldemort's weird half-ghost thing gets away. It gives us a ton of questions that are answered throughout the series. I'd say this is tricky to pull off, and this wouldn't have worked if Harry hadn't already been successful at manipulating the Mirror of Erised to get the stone, already besting Voldemort. While cool powers are essential in creating magic systems, Sanderson's second law of magic states that limitations are greater than powers when creating engaging magic systems and stories. Let's dive in. In Sanderson's essay, which I've linked below in the description, he differentiates between 3 types of limitations: weaknesses, limitations, and costs. Limitations are things magic cannot do. This could be on a macro level, a limitation to an entire magic system, or on a micro level, a limitation to one ability within a larger system. Mistborn, for example, is a magic system limited by metals. None of the abilities are possible without having metals in your system. The telekinesis ability is even further limited. Characters cannot just move metal around in any direction, but instead can push the metal directly away from them or pull the metal towards them. Weaknesses are things that enemies can exploit. The Avatar: The Last Airbender magic system is a great example of this. Each element has built-in weaknesses to exploit, the biggest one being that a bender can't bend without their element. The final type of limitation is cost. This is the list of potion ingredients required to make an invisibility potion, the personal energy it takes to cast a spell, the offering up of something in order to use magic, or that using magic makes you slowly go insane. Building in limitations to your magic system and to your characters is essential for a compelling story. Iron Man is a great example of this in action. Well, actually not Iron Man, but Tony Stark. We know Tony's superpowers, his mind and his money, but the Iron Man movies also show us Tony's weaknesses. He cares more about money than people.
What do you say to that?
Absolutely ridiculous.
Contrast that to Ironheart's introduction in Wakanda Forever. I'm not sure what Riri's weaknesses might be, if she even has them. Her character's lack of limitations, or at least the lack of focus on them, creates an uninteresting narrative. Tony's limitations force him to struggle and fight and grow as a character, while Riri's lack of struggle makes her forgettable. This is the same reason I turned off She-Hulk on episode 1. Through the Infinity Saga, Bruce Banner was interesting because he struggled to control Hulk. His anger created tension and provided some of the best moments in the entire Infinity Saga. In contrast, She-Hulk was boring because the narrative did little to set up limitations to her abilities. Really, it went out of their way to make sure we knew she didn't have any, and therefore her character created no tension.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger.
My examples are sticking mostly to Marvel in this video, but there are so many great examples throughout the fantasy genre. Comment your favorites. I use these examples because Iron Man and Ironheart essentially have the same powers. On the surface level, Hulk and She-Hulk are the same superhero. It demonstrates and highlights the fact that most of the time powers are not original. Where magic systems and powers become compelling is in the limitations, weaknesses, and costs built into the magic system. Tony Stark's storyline in the Infinity Saga focused on his limitations and took the time to explore them. Between learning he sold weapons to terrorists, realizing his lack of care for people would eventually make him lose Pepper, and creating a machine that ended up killing thousands. In the same way, magic systems are more engaging with depth. A proper limitation should provide a lot of exploration and a lot of depth to your world and your characters. As fantasy fans, we love strange worlds and odd powers. But too much strange and too many types of magic can make a story feel bloated. Sanderson's third law of magic states, expand what you already have before you add something new. We have already talked about depth some in this video series, but only on the surface level. And now it's time to talk about it in depth. Sanderson gives 3 different ways to expand and explore your magic: extrapolate, interconnect, and streamline. Every change you make to the world has ripple effects. If a portion of the population or all the population can fly, it drastically changes travel, trade, and economics, culture, passing of information, clothing, religion, the list goes on. And extrapolating is the process of diving in to see how deep this change goes. Avatar: The Way of Water is a good example of this. As far as I can remember, I'm by no means an expert on anything Blue Avatar. The second film built off ideas they'd introduced in the first film and explored a new ecosystem of that world without really adding new elements into the magic system. Feel free to jump in with other good examples in the comments. At this point, I think it's important to add a caveat. With world building, it's impossible to build everything. If you start digging, you could easily never stop digging. When it comes to writing a novel, it's important to identify some parameters for your story. For example, my book, The Fourth Wall, takes place in a world where fiction is power, and reading someone's book is like casting a vote for them. For the purpose of my novel, I had to consider how someone in power might limit others from gaining power, and introduced the practice of flagging authors. This drives up the prices of their books, making it less likely for readers to choose to buy them. However, for the purposes of my novel, I didn't need to dive any deeper into economics and look at how fiction as power might affect inflation, trade, the stock exchange, etc. But it's going to happen. We're going to have more than one idea. Sanderson suggests connecting these ideas to give them a cohesive feel. Mistborn, yes, I'm going to use Mistborn as an example again. Really, it is a great example because it technically has 3 magic systems. But does it? I could argue there is really only one because they feel so connected. Though Allomancy and Furukami have different abilities, and those abilities are activated differently, they both use the same metals and have a similar aesthetic.
Streamlining is looking for ways you can use already existent world building instead of creating something new. This is a little hard to give examples of because it happens in the background when world building and is not always visible on the page. The Greenbone saga is one that comes to mind though. There are several nations involved in these novels, but instead of creating a new magic system for each nation, the Greenbone saga only has one type of magic, and when we go to a new nation or meet a new culture, we see how that culture reacts to the magical resource jade. By the explanation I gave of the Greenbone saga, it would be easy to think that something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where each nation has a different type of magic, is a bad example. But I think in this case, the nations created themselves around the 4 types of bending, which feels organic. Like-minded people and like-powered people coming together. I think Avatar is actually a great example because when they go to interesting places, the characters meet cultures who have adapted the magic system to their needs and their situation. Swamp bending comes to mind immediately as a unique style of water bending created out of a reaction to the environment.